All right, and it seems that we're live. And good evening or good morning. And with me this evening, I have the remarkable Eric Weathers, and he's joining us to speak about his career in graphics, in drawing and lettering, and everything he's been producing on and off, inside and out the comics world lately. And well, to everyone, big a big shout out to Eric Weathers. How are you tonight? Then tonight for me, but to
It's
whoever
after
else listening,
it's
how are you?
afternoon for me, yeah, but I'm doing quite well. Doing quite well. Thank you for having me on.
No problem at all. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. And obviously, right now you're with a lot of work, as far as I understand.
Hmm.
You are lettering quite a few graphic novels. So you have two books coming out. One should be getting to the hands of the readers very soon, and another one probably later on in the end of the year, or maybe by the beginning of next year, I would presume. So the first one is Jawbreakers,
Correct.
written by Richard C. Meyer. Now, this is something that you won't find, at least at the moment, you won't find in the shops. It has been directly sold through Indiegogo, through an Indiegogo campaign. Very successful one.
Yeah.
So I presume that gave you a lot of work. And the other one is Graveyard Shift. Both projects penciled and inked by John Mallon, which used to be at Marvel. And that one, Graveyard Shift, is was I right saying it's later this year or beginning of next year? What's the due date on it?
Well, the campaign will wrap up on Halloween, so in just a few days. And his goal, because the book is done, we have gone through all of the setup, and he had the art done for a couple of years already. It's an older story of his, but his goal is to have everything out and to all the backers before Christmas. So yeah, it'll be out later by the end of the year. If everything goes well.
Okay, and well, back to Jawbreakers. So Jawbreakers was available through Indiegogo. That's now finished, right? So
Yes.
is it going to be any chances anyone interested in it will be able to purchase in the future? Is there any plans to get it on the shops? Apart that, obviously, there could always be a scalper or two that
Yeah.
might sell some copies on eBay. But apart from that,
Right.
is there any plans to make it available worldwide?
Well, I know right now that the campaign is still active, so if there's anybody listening that hasn't purchased it, they can get it from the Indiegogo. In the future, I know that he had talked about his plans being releasing it like this in a premium format, and then
Mhm.
splitting the story into two and releasing it in like an issue one and issue two through Diamond. Um, I haven't heard any changes to that. Obviously, he's going through some other things right now, but if we if his plans haven't changed, then um, certainly I think he would still like to do that to get it into as many hands as possible. But I don't know what that looks like. I don't have that inside track. So
Right. Well, just for anyone not actually familiar with Jawbreakers, I myself only briefly have an idea of what the story is. Can you just give us a little bit, a nutshell of what actually Jawbreakers is all about?
yeah, well, basically it's a team of mercenaries that go fight King Kong.
Hmm.
That's the shortest version I can give you. And without I don't want to say too much, but I
But
will.
King Kong is the good guy in this story, isn't it? I think
Um,
so.
yeah, in a way, yeah. It's they do go to
Because
fight.
that's what the little synopsis says, that
Yeah, yeah.
they're
They
there
they
kind of
they
saving
go to
them off.
fight, but they find out that maybe it's not such a bad. He's not such a bad monkey.
Nice. So
So
it's a story with a lot of grace in between. I like that. And
and a lot.
go ahead, go ahead.
I said the story has a lot of heart to it. I was really impressed with it.
Yeah, he seems quite promising from
Mhm.
all the pages that I've seen on show, on the Inigo campaign. John Mellon did these very panoramic panels. It always looks very interesting, and as well, Graveyard Shift. That's like a modern retelling of what is that? I keep on forgetting that 80s movies.
The Universal monsters.
The classic monsters,
Yeah,
isn't it?
classic monsters, exactly. Dracula and Frankenstein and uh, they all have allegorical characters in this story, their own versions of them. So it's vampires and monsters and all sorts of fun stuff. He
So
John
okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say John Malin described it as if the classic Universal monsters meet the X-Men or were the X-Men. So it's that sort of they're a superhero team, but uh, they're also monsters that we're familiar with.
Yes. It has something to do as well with those scientists that are working on a particular project to do with those creatures. They get reincarnated in the bodies of those monsters. Is that correct?
Yeah, they basically become their own experiments because they are traded. What am I trying to say? They are tricked, and the guy that they are working for is turns on them and kills them and puts them in their own experiments, and they become the team known as Graveyard Shift.
All right. So they become eventually like superhero versions
Yeah,
of those
yeah,
monsters. Then. All right. Very
exactly.
good. Okay. So now going much further back. So
Mhm.
what? I mean, how long have you been working in comics then, or how long have you been working in things related to arts, so to say?
Well, as far as working goes, I think I officially would have started my professional comics career. I mean, you sell a book to somebody, you're considered a professional. So I'm going to use that as my
Indeed, indeed.
as an indie.
A career is anything you make cash out of.
That's
So
right. So I started about 2010 with my a book I did with a couple of friends of mine called Flying Fortress, um, and we that was just sort of a hey, we should do a comic book someday, and we threw this idea around, and then at the tail end of 2010, we were sort of drawing it and writing it, but nothing was really coming together. But then one of the co-creators emailed me, and he's like, "Well, we got to get something made because I went ahead and bought a table for this convention at Planet Comic Con in Kansas City."
right.
So that was sort of what lit the fire um, to get the book going because you can't go to a convention if you don't have anything to sell
Hmm.
when you have a table. So we got a little 8-page ash can done, and from there, in our spare time, we would just do an issue whenever we could get one done. We'd put it out, and then the next, and the next, and over the remaining 6 years, we put out 8 different issues to
Hmm.
complete a whole 2-volume story.
Right. So that's your debut work. And
Mhm.
what functions were you actually working on in that book? You quoted that you were the letterer on one of the issues, but were you also the artist, or you contributed in any other way?
Well, co-creator first and
Mhm.
foremost. It wouldn't happen without the other guys, Andy Moore and Andy Walker. But I did all the artwork, save a few
All
pages
right.
that were inked. And I did all the artwork, the pencils, inks, letters, colors. I did all of that. Um,
Okay. So while you're explaining to me, I'm going to share that because you have sent me the
okay.
link. So I'm just going to start cracking on that. Um,
Yeah, it's I like to describe it as a great travel, a great journey through my artistic process. Issue 1 and issue 8 are
right.
miles apart in
Right.
terms of quality.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm focusing right now. I hope you are seeing this as
mhm,
well with everyone else. So we got Flying Fortress number 8 right now here on the screen. I just picked a random page. Here you have been the letterer. And that was one of the main reasons I invited you in because I knew you
right.
were lettering those other books, and that's a bit I will want to talk about very soon. As it is, every time there is something that a person doesn't specialize in, I get fascinated by those things.
Yeah,
In these cases, letters. Maybe for a lot of people, and that's the reason why I invited Eric here today. For a lot of people, it might seem or sound or look like inconsequential, function in a comic book. But to be honest, it's a very, very important thing because, well, not only tells a story, but it also brings everything together. It makes a page, well, after a page has been successful enough with the art, and then the colors elevating it or diminishing it, depending what is the case,
Yeah.
then the letters tell more than one story. One of the stories that the letters tell is that well, they cannot overpower the page. You know, they have to leave
Right.
enough space for the art to breathe and to obviously to showcase the story, but also they have to be you know, they're like the guy in the theater that helps the actors get back to their lines. You know, when they forget them or they miss the line, it's there basically to not be in the way, but at the same time be noticeable and not be imposing. And sometimes, especially with sound effects, which is a whole other subsection of lettering, that really helps to convey the story and a kind of augment some moments that the reader might have missed. And when he's exaggerated, you might take the reader out of the story. So it's a very important thing, lettering, and you know you will be talking about it for a little bit. But first, let's just concentrate here on what you were explaining about Flying Fortress. Then, so 8 issues altogether over 6 years, right? And you've done all the art.
Yes. Yeah, 8 issues. I did all the art and lettering with, like I said, save a few pages that were inked by a friend.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So you've done the this is by the way, this is digitally done or it was all traditional?
Mixture of both. I experimented with different techniques through the years. I don't think I ever did any page in this book. I'm sorry, any issue in this book completely digital. But some of the first pages in the first couple of issues I would do digitally just to save time. And
Right.
and then through the process of making the book, I sort of developed where I would do my layouts digitally and print them out, and then pencil and ink them traditionally, and scan them in, and color them on the computer.
And the colors are okay. So obviously the colors are yours as well. So it was well, this is the whole thing basically. So you've done the art, you've done the colors, you've done the letters, and you co-wrote the story. And it lasted for 8 issues. Eight issues. And if anyone wants to get this on print, I mean, obviously it's available here as a digital version. So this is the actual website, flyingfortress.com, for anyone wanting to read the story.
Flyingfortresscomic.com.
Oh yes, flyingfortresscomic.com. Yes.
Yeah.
I will put the link to this on the description of this video. And then anyone obviously wanting to check it out should definitely check it out. I was starting to read it on issue 1, but before jumping on this interview, so I haven't had time to go through the whole thing yet. But I will certainly will. And then after this, then so this ended when 2006. You were saying?
It ended in, I think our last issue was done in 2016.
Oh yeah, sorry. You started
Yeah.
back into yes. Okay.
Yeah, started in 2010, ended in 2016.
That's it. That's what it was. Very good. And after this, what was the follow-up then?
Well, there wasn't much follow-up for a while. After this, I switched my artistic endeavors over to digital painting because I always wanted to give that a try.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that's the icon. Actually, the icon on my Google Hangout photo is a painting that I did of just a weird-looking orc.
Yes.
Because when you do digital painting, apparently you have to do fantasy characters. But that was just
tends to be the norm. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. You got to have your orc chieftain, or you don't have any cred.
And a semi-naked woman as well with a big sword that we usually compliment.
Oh yeah, there you go. But no, I sort of put comics down for a little while and just focused on learning to paint, and I did that for probably about a year, just doing stuff like that. Portraits for people, family, and things like that. And I tried my hand at getting into a concept art portfolio put together. and that sort of, in a way, sort of led me back into comics. So it's been sort of a, I just can't quit it. I can't quit comics.
Oh, well, when you thought you were out, they pulled you back in.
That's right, exactly.
So on this the concept art side of your career, so have you been doing anything for any major companies? Anything you want to tell us about? I mean, what it has been, concept art only for comic books, for games, or anything else in between?
Well, it started. I actually got a small gig for for an indie game. Um, it was a trading card game called Dragons and Warriors, which actually had a tie-in comic as well. I started doing that before I painted, so all of that was the cards were drawn in my comic book style, which is what the guy wanted. And then after I started painting, I didn't do any big, big publications. It was all just sort of work for hire, commission stuff for people, or just paintings for myself, just as fun to practice. So, but like I said, the painting, what was going to be a concept art portfolio piece, turned into the comic that I'm working on next. And I don't know if you want to segue to that next or not, but that is the sort of the short road from comics to painting back to comics is I was trying to do that concept for a Wizard of Oz variation. And I thought maybe I could, do some concept art, character designs, and things like that for Wizard of Oz, as if it were a video game where each of the four characters were a playable class in like a shooter.
All right.
And as I was working on it, I started to really think about what that would look like as a story. So I started thinking about the story more and taking notes on it. And I was listening to a podcast from some other artists. There's a concept artist. There are a couple of friends. They've been they're big names in the concept art industry. They're called Dave Raposa and Dan Warren. And they were
Dave Raposa and Dan Warren, yeah?
Yeah. And they were doing their Twitch stream, and I was listening to their, they were taking questions from the audience, and somebody had brought up, about making concept art portfolios for things that aren't for like, how do I want to say this? A lot of concept artists will want to make a book, like an art of book of their own IP.
Yes.
And they were saying, don't do that. Like, if you have your own IP and you want to make an art book of it, the only people that are going to buy that book are people that already like your art. You're not going to reach anybody.
Yes.
Right? So my thought was, okay, I do want to reach an audience. I do have this story that I would want to tell. So maybe I could just turn this idea back into comics. And for a while I was like, maybe I could do painted panels instead of traditional line art drawing panels. But it just sort of worked its way back into, traditional comic book format, which I'm fine with. I'm actually happy that it is. I'm comfortable here because I put a lot of years in it. And I was able to hire a writer, and we're working together on the script now. And I'm, putting some art together, and we're going to hopefully have it ready for about spring next year is what we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah, I will be sharing that now. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully I didn't run over your plans there with bringing it up, but they're sort of tied together. That story is.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But let me just have a look here. What it is? Yes. Okay. So yeah, it's an interesting way to get about a new creation. So basically, you started off as when I understand what you were saying, a lot of concept artists, the guys especially that are starting off, and I know that from speaking to them. I've never been a concept artist myself, but from what I know from speaking to these people, a lot of them do what I would call, again, you probably have a correct term for it, but what I would call as a mock conceptual art. So basically, it's a non-existent project which just gives access to create environments and characters in a specific
Mm-hmm.
style,
Mm-hmm.
which would then would probably be used for a particular media item, so either a game or a book or a comic. So I believe I understand that's what you were saying. So it
Yeah.
began as just like a full conceptual art for a non-existent product and then non-existent IP, but then you eventually develop the IP from the concept art that you created, which I think is genius. It's a great way to go about it. Um,
Thank you.
I presume that's what you were saying, right?
That's yeah. That's exactly right.
That's what it is. Okay, let
Yeah.
me just then
Yeah.
share the. I believe this is probably the cover, but I'll just start sharing it, and then obviously you can explain to us what we are looking at.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Obviously, this is your art line, and these are your colors as well. Is that right?
No, they're not my colors.
They're not your colors.
These,
Oh,
yeah, it is my line art. But I hired Brian Magny. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's the colorer for Cautionary Comics. He's doing Ravage, Kill All Men, and everything else that at Cautionary Comics. I paid him to color that up for me. We
yeah, let me
are
just share it with everyone because
yeah.
I'm missing one. I'm actually off the screen. There we go.
Okay. But yeah, it was something I sort of tinkered on between lettering jobs because I know, it's that's sort of what Oz is going to be right now is, get everybody else's work done so I have time to work on my own. But what you're looking at is sort of a hero shot of the five. You've got Dorothy in the front with
Right.
the lion crouched behind her, and then Scarecrow on the left, and the Tin
Oh,
Man
of
back
course.
there,
Okay.
and then that globe
Yes.
there next to Dorothy and above Lion. That's Toto.
Totally.
So in our version, Toto's not a dog; he's a drone. He's a
Awesome.
drone that was created by Dorothy, and
Mhm.
she uses him as sort of a as a tool for getting out of tight spots, and she could send him up to sort of spy on an enemy position, get
Yes.
a scan, a readout of whoever's there. A lot, like I said, a lot of
And I'm going to
this
share those pages
German.
because you got to hear the black
Okay.
and white version of this. So
Yeah,
again, the name of this project is Oz, the Fall of the Yellow Brick Road. Is that correct?
that's a working title. Yeah, but we're
Well,
we're trying to
it's a great
zero in on what
subtitle.
that is because we're trying to find a name that will say yes, it's Oz, but it's
Mhm.
it's not all magic and wizardry. It's bullets and explosions, and I
So
like to
it's a
describe it as Wizard of Oz.
futuristic version of Oz.
Hmm.
So we got here Dorothy, obviously. So Toto has been replaced by an orb. Would I dare say they're kind of remind me a little bit of those drones in Oblivion, which was initially a graphic novel, but it was canceled, and the guys that directed the movie actually decided to go straight into the movie. It's a Tom Cruise
Yeah,
movie, I think.
yeah,
It
yeah.
reminds me. I found they were very interesting characters. Those drones.
I'm
So
gonna
I
have to
think it's
watch
a
that
great
again.
idea to have
Well, thank you.
the dog replaced by an orb,
Yeah,
a drone
we're
orb.
thinking of him as sort of our R2D2 sort of character.
Very good. And
So,
you got here Scarecrow, the Tin Man,
hmm
obviously, which is little stiletto legs,
hmm
and of course he's the Lion Man, isn't it? And he gets replaced by this by this Berserker guy here. That's
yeah, hmm
very interesting. And again, yeah, I mean, I can understand now what you're saying with your line art evolution in your previous work, The Flying Fortress, from issue 1 to 8, and now what a leap from issue 8 of Flying Fortress to this.
thank you.
Uh, it's right now. It's I mean, let's just go back a little bit. I mean, you have um, art learning experience. Well, from a art school, or you're self taught. What's the deal on
Um,
here?
no, all self-taught. I sort of learned by doing. It's just ever since I was a kid, I was like, I want to be a comic book artist, but I never took it seriously until the co-creator of Flying Fortress was like, oh, hey, by the way, we got a table and it's in 3 months, and we don't have a book yet. So I sort of feed off of that that deadline, that looming deadline, that whole desire to have something new to show people.
You push
And
yourself to
yeah,
learn.
it really pushes me. And then I struggle through every panel. it's
As it
never
should.
easy. Yeah.
I was listening. I'm doing myself now the 100 Days of Comics, where I ridiculously will try to finish 2 issues in 100 days. I mean,
Hmm.
most likely I will not finish 20 pages, let alone 2 issues. But I was browsing over other guys, both semi-pros and pros, doing their version of 100 Days of Comics, and one of them, I can't remember which one, said something, quite interesting. He said, which is true for every comic book artist, the fun part of any comic book is the sketching, is to kind of piece piece the puzzle together. When you're
Hmm.
actually doing the pages, you find some pleasure in it. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. But it's a chore. It's the
Yeah.
most annoying, most boring part is to actually do the pages.
Yeah,
And
that's accurate.
I want to I zoomed in on this as much as I could without breaking up the.
You should be able to click on them and make them each one a little bigger,
Oh
I
yeah,
believe.
yeah.
So
They just stay the same size.
if
So,
you okay, if you right click and go to like view image, its own
yeah, I
open
can
image in new
open it
tab,
in.
then you
There
can
we
get
go.
it full
Oh
size and
yeah,
zoom in
perfect.
there.
That's it.
So
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, because I was looking at the line art and I love it. I mean,
thank you.
it's everything is in place now. The line weight is beautiful. You got all the right twinks and little nods in the right places. So yeah, you really came onto your own as an artist. I like as well the narrative sequence. I like the way. Let me just open this one up. Yeah, I mean, you got here the story being told without words, and that's always for me a good stepping stone of any story.
Hmm.
When again reminds me what they were doing with Wall-E, the Walt Disney movie, which is like the first 30 minutes or 40 minutes. There's absolutely no dialogue and no exposition. And
Right.
as I was watching that movie, I kind of thought, you know what? These guys have the balls to do this. I hope the whole movie is like this. And
I
unfortunately,
know.
wasn't.
Yeah.
After an hour, they actually had to bring dialogue. But that is a great take on a story. A story that you can tell without any words is always an exemplary story.
And it's
It's
important, as a comic book artist to be able to tell that story without words. You need to be able to sell it. You need to be able to have the reader understand what's going on. So
mhm.
um, I I think I do the best I can, and hopefully that comes across. So
Yeah, it's very good. With some here, obviously the hatch is being cut. Obviously, once there are some things, although I love black and white. Um, half of the comics on my shelves are black and white, and the other half is in colors. And there's a reason for that because some things need to be in black and white and need to stay in black and white.
hmm.
Um Obviously, there's a counter argument to that, which is if the right colors are applied, then it will augment the story and it will make the story more vivid. Obviously,
Right.
will be more powerful as well. But again, it's a 50-50 kind of thing. It's something that has to be brainstormed in every case, and I'm pretty sure you yourself go through that through that paradigm, which is I'm sure once you finish one of these pages, you like it exactly as it is. At the same time, some artists always think, no, 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 I'm doing it, but I know for sure this deserves to be colored and it needs to be colored. For
Hmm.
example, I'm quite happy with what I see with what I'm seeing here, and this, for example, will be a book that I'll be buying in black and white nonetheless. But it's I'm sure you have great plans for colors in this book.
Yeah,
And
we do.
are you going to be using the same color artist that you used there for that promotional cover?
I'm not sure. Right now, we are just we're still sort of getting it if written. Down the line, we're going to be looking at more colorists. I have a couple of guys in mind that I'm going to reach out to, but the getting the color covered sooner was sort of important because I'm trying to get it into a print because we're going to be at a convention in a couple of weeks, and I would like to have that print there. So,
okay, but we're talking about the whole book here, or just an ash can?
Just the ash can will be available there. Yeah, the book's not. It's not even.
Of course. Okay.
The script is almost done, and then from then on, it'll be smooth sailing, getting everything done. Hopefully, so.
Well, like here in this, I presume is a flashback kind of sequence, obviously, because you're looking at the panels in a different fashion, and the line here is a little bit looser. I like that. Both in the background and in the foreground, yeah. And then this is a capsule that is falling on the previous page, I'll presume. And so this is part of the ashcan there, these pages here. Are we looking at the ashcan pages? Right.
Yes, you are. So it's sort of our version of how Dorothy arrives in Oz. Oz is a sort of a utopia in a world that has gone south, so to speak. The wizard in our story is sort of this Elon Musk genius, and he the world. The guy I'm working on it with, the writer's name is Zeb Hatfield, and he really took my germ of an idea, my just little speck of an idea, and really just made it explode with amazing story. So he went in with each character's got way more depth than I could have ever created for him. But so he said we're having Oz be this sort of zone where he created this utopia in a world that is destroyed or ravaged in some way, and he creates this. He creates Oz, and he relinquishes control of it in the form of these 4 AI constructs, and each of these AI constructs controls a north, south, east, and west portion of this Oz world. And 2 of them go rogue and go bad. 2 of them remain good or neutral, and sort of remain to themselves. And of the bad ones, one of them wants all the power. So the witch of the West is that one. We don't call them witches, of course, as we're calling them watchers. So they're these AI sort of overlords, and like I said, 2 of them are nice and 2 of them are naughty, and so the witch of the it's hard not to say witch because you just get tied with Oz that way. But the Watcher of the West is the one that wants all the glory for herself. So when Gale shows up, she sort of throws not a wrench in the monkey works, but she sort of, if you know the story of Oz, the Witch of the East is, the house lands on her and kills her, and that's how Dorothy gets the ruby slippers. And
yes,
and the witch wants those slippers. But our story is a bit different in that the East and West Witch are more warring with one another as well, and our hero inadvertently helps the bad guys. So.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, seems a lot of interesting ideas here. And so, being this the Ashcan, what's the plan with the book then? How many pages is it? Is it a one-off graphic novel? Is it going to be several issues? And when exactly are you planning to release it? And where is going to be released? Is it going to be crowdfunded as well? What's the whole plan for this?
Okay, the final issue count is between 6 and 8. We're leaning towards 6.
All right.
If you were to sort of put them out as 24-page issues, our plan is to collect each of those 6 issues into 2s. So there would be 48-page trades that we would theoretically crowdfund. That's our plan, to have like maybe 3, at most 4 48-page trades. So it would be like 170 some pages. That's me doing math, which is not good. Yeah. So, but yeah, it would be 3 to 4 books together that would tell the one story of the Wizard of Oz from, Dorothy arriving to in the movie, Dorothy taking the the balloon back home. Obviously, we don't have a balloon back home. We have a different story, but that whole arc of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz is we're telling it in our own way and going down our own paths. But in that framework, we're doing 6 to 8 issues. It just depends on how we handle certain storylines that we go through, and what we decide to expand on, what we decide to cut. Like I said, we're writing right now, so.
Well, you got a lot of work there in front of you. I mean, not only is a new IP, but he's got those undertones of the original Oz story. So you have kind of a crossbreed the whole project, isn't it? So you kind of get some references from the previous book and the previous movie, and then do your own take on it. So that kind of becomes almost like a double amount of work, double function.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then you're doing the art as well, and you're probably going to do the letters as well here.
Yeah, I know a guy for sure.
And then you got any big name lined up for the colors, or that's all still in the?
We're still in the figuring that out phase.
Very good.
Nothing to announce yet.
Okay. Anyway, so it will be at least at the moment. We will have a nice. We'll call it a nice graphic novel around 50 pages, so 48 pages, 50 pages each, and that should be coming on again as a launch on crowdfunding as well.
Yeah, in March.
Soon, then.
Yeah.
March. Okay, so so spring next year.
That's
We're definitely gonna keep an eye on this, and this will, well, being successful, or even if not being successful, I'm sure it will be. That's without a question. But even if you even if you will not be, people like us, we always have to finish what we started, even if it takes years.
Yeah.
So there's not never a question of not finishing. We just don't finish when our eyes and our arms fall off. And we're like those guys. What is it called? The heroes that go that go untold. The martyrs. We're the martyrs of drawing.
We will die for it.
We die for it. We don't care. It's a cause. We die for it. So that's the thing that, just like letters, is misunderstood by a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true, and often overlooked, I think.
It is. So comic book artists are that kind of people that do die for the art, and so even if this even if this wouldn't be the platform, the crowdfunding platform as a launch platform will not be exactly what you wanted, you would still be able to crack this into a few issues and like you say, go on the convention circuit. So this is definitely work here for how long? For a couple of years? How long do you think you're gonna be? Yeah,
it'd be a couple of years worth of work.
Because you mentioned 130 or 170 pages altogether.
Something like that. Yeah, like I said, it depended on the final.
Yes,
whether it's 6 or 8.
pages.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and when you're doing everything, like Flying Fortress, I did, like I said, layouts to letters. Thankfully, I'm in a position now where I can hire a colorist, so we will be. I'll be able to get the book done way faster than I did Flying Fortress, and it's more. I just have more time to work now, anyway. So, So
are you doing this full time now, or are you still like many of us as a part time job or another full time job and doing this part time, or what's the deal with you, privately speaking?
A bit of both. I work from home, so when I am not working on freelance and chasing around a 3-year-old, I am.
Yes.
I'm working on my books. So right now, freelance is anything from lettering to video work to basically whatever I can get my hands on. Doing other art for other projects, or painting a portrait for somebody, or
that was going to be my little question. Actually, I was going to ask, apart from this project, in terms of comic books, are you right now working on other books as well, in terms of penciling and inking, or this is going to be you're going to dedicate yourself to this one only in terms of pages?
No, I am working on a couple of other projects that are I can't say much right now
Hmm.
because nothing's really been announced, but I do have other things lined up. Oz is going to be um, what I work on after I day to day after I work on the other stuff. So it's until the campaign hits, then it'll be full time for Oz to get it out the door as fast as possible. But I'm going to have time between now and then to have another book to start another project as well. But that's going to be for completely unrelated. And like I said, I'm not going to say what it is yet because I'm not allowed to. But yeah,
Okay.
there are other plans to work on other things because you got to
Yeah,
put
of
food on
course.
the table, got to feed those kids.
Okay, so that said, you are lined up as an artist for another book for
Hmm.
the next few months. All right, awesome.
Yes,
So pretty soon,
and
hopefully, we'll get
beyond
this.
too. So I've got another project that's like maybe even over a year out that is not related to Oz as well. So
Oh wow! So you completely tied up already.
yeah, yeah. So in the meantime, it's between drawing my book and everybody else's book. I'm trying to letter everybody else's book because
Yes. Yeah.
that's a fast turnaround time.
Well, I had to hear a list of guys that wanted to hire you, but there you go, gentlemen. Eric Weathers is tied up. No problem. So let's jump on the letters. You mentioned that I don't know if you were still planning on doing that, but you said you were doing a little bit of lettering work and you wouldn't mind sharing the screen. And as you do it, we could probably talk
Yeah,
about your
yeah. I guess I could go through my
lettering.
process a little bit. I'm actually lettering the ash can right now.
Huh?
So let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah, share screen. I think I got to lock it on this side, isn't it? Or do you lock the screen on your
I
side
think
at
you
this
have to
point?
do it on your side since you're the host of
Very good.
with the most. I think if you just click on my thing, it'll lock there. I'm
Yes,
not entirely certain, but
yeah, I do understand how it is. Yes, let me see. Here we go. I think you're on your own now.
all right. So this is sort of behind the scenes of how I letter.
I
I
can
don't know
pop
if
in
it's
some questions because both for myself, my personal interest, because I never actually letter anything digitally. I hire people to letter my stuff. I used to do it traditionally, but for anyone watching that obviously wants to get into this, either just letters or the whole comic book shenanigans, tell me what are the programs usually letterers use?
the main two. I'd say the main three are Adobe Illustrator. I have used Adobe Photoshop, and you can use Clip Studio Paint, or also known as Manga Studio.
Hmm. And in terms of fonts, do you do certain custom fonts from scratch, or do you always use pre-programmed fonts, especially when it comes to the special sound effects?
Hmm.
You go at those drawing them, from the whole thing manually. When I say manually, I mean digitally, but meaning from
Right,
scratch, basically.
right.
How does it work?
Uh, Um, it sort of depends on the sound effect and on the direction of the person in charge of the book. Some people want hand drawn sound effects because they just have that sort of organic feel. Um, a lot of times it's just taking even a font from Blambot, which is where I get a lot of my stuff because I just worked on a lot of indie books and they have a lot of free fonts and inexpensive paid fonts. But let me maybe show you what that would look like. So I have to do a thud sound effect here.
Hmm.
So let me go ahead and grab that. Now, normally I just, copy and paste from the script, which I have in a separate window, and you can just drop it in and work on it from here. So this is not a good font for a sound effect
Right.
because it's too thin. You want something nice and thick that's going to give it, uh, and you gotta move it to a spot that you can actually see it when you're going through the fonts. Um, Something nice and thick that'll stand out. Bada Boom is pretty generic now these days. Everybody seems to use that for everything. But you find one that you like, and I've got quite a few here now,
Right.
and I'll just go with this. Normally, you would take one like this, and maybe give it a color, and a lot of people will just say, "Oh, that's good," you know, and be done with it. But there's a lot more of an art to it than just
Yes.
picking a font and throwing it in there and maybe
I'm just trying it. Yeah.
maybe twisting it a little bit, like this.
Hmm.
You want to
Yeah,
go in
work it a
and
bit.
yeah, so you want to go in and move each letter around so you can
Actually,
give it.
what you've done just there was quite cool, actually, because it was like it was refracted. You had like like a underneath shade that thud. Like it was repeated, overlapping. That's
Hmm.
probably good for this panel. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, I just sort of take it, mix it up, and give it a give it a character unto itself.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
if I get a little if I get a little bored with the font itself, then you can go in and do some things within Illustrator to change the letters up a bit.
Yes.
Um, it can stretch and pull and all of that, and I still like to do that just to sort of make it not just the generic font that it
Hmm.
is of itself. So then, um, I just sort of tinker on this for a little while, and in a minute or two or 5 or 10 or however long I spend on it, it becomes its own sound
Own entity.
effect,
Yeah.
and then you can move it around however you need and where you want. And I like to dress it up and give it a nice outline and
Hmm. Hmm.
all of that stuff. So,
Now, let me ask you. Obviously, this is the Ashcan, but if
mhm,
this would be the colored work, uh, obviously the letters come in at the last stage. So once the whole page is been artified and colorized, that's when you finally come in. So you know exactly what to do.
mhm,
And when you have a big sound effect on a page, especially there's a double page spread, let's say, and
mhm,
there's something really big, a really loud sound, a really loud bang that goes across a few panels, and you have to. There's some foreground elements, and then you got to position the letters halfway in between the foreground elements and the background elements. So a complex sound effect.
mhm.
You guys usually you do the color work of those same letters, so the whole thing. So it's not just the structure of the letters, but if it's something custom made, you got to go at it and paint, and you got to match it with whatever colors and art style has been used on that particular book. What's the whole thought process there, and usually how long it takes? Let's say a couple of pages. One page is a talking heads page. There's a lot of
Mhm.
exposition. And then another one, a page later, is exactly that sort of page, a double page spread with a lot of sound effects and very minimal dialogue. So, in terms of thought process and how long it takes and how much work it gives, what we're talking about in terms of time frame and in terms of stress.
I would say, to start off with stress, the stressful part is when there is no room for balloons.
Yeah, that's my kind of pages. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, having the art that is already having working with an artist that is aware um, that that there needs to be negative space for the balloons. That's
Mhm.
possibly the most important thing in relieving stress, um, because you have to get real creative when there isn't any room for your balloons to fit on the page. So that can take some time, and the more you do it, the more um, you can kind of make that flow a little bit easier, and it helps if you are um, used to that artist. So if say you're working on
Right.
a book, and um, I had a small project I did. I guess it was around this time last year, and it was similar to that. There wasn't a lot of room here and there, but you sort of learn the rhythms of that artist, and you know where you can fit stuff, even if they didn't really leave room for you. Um, but to answer your other point about time frame, um, dialogue balloons, I
And
think,
amount of work as well. Time frame
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
I
amount of
feel
work.
like they can sort of feel similar in time, whether you're doing it like a big dialogue page, um, like you said, a talking heads page or a big actions double splash, because the sound effect needs um, just as much care as the shapes of the balloons and how they connect with one another, whether you're using connecting tails or they're connecting balloons, or as the character, is it a thought, is it a whisper, is it a yell, is it a scream, is it, all of these different things
Yes.
sort of have their own challenges, have their own feeling, and sort of their own internal language of how you would tell that story with those balloons. So, a soft whisper, do you want to go with just a gray text, or just do a dotted outline, or both, or change the font within it? A lot of that stuff just sort of adds up. And I think, generally speaking, um, it's a lot of work. It can probably take an hour per page, and that's me guesstimating because I never really timed myself. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's my 3-year-old.
That's right.
But
What's
yeah,
involving it?
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, each one sort of has its own challenge, and they sort of work. I wouldn't say one's easier than the other. I mean, dropping in a standard balloon and adding a tail, I mean, that's pretty simple. It's
Yes.
it's faster than doing a sound effect, but still, when the challenge is there with a art that is not accessible for lettering, then you
Yes.
have to get creative. So,
I mean, like the previous example of your own work, the Flying Fortress, where there was a lot of negative space that you could easily feed in your own balloons, which you did, and which I
mhm.
presented here on the screen. And then obviously you have your present work here, and what is most panels now in modern day comics. There's very little that space, unless obviously there is again those sort of exposition pages where less care will be given to the backgrounds, and then
Right.
well, and then it's a little bit easier for the letter to actually have room to play with. But again, the challenge is always to find the right spot that doesn't diminish the art that is already there. Like for example, this panel that you're working here now, and then again that always that dual that again, correct me if I'm wrong, but is always the fight of wanting to put the text in a place that does not look too obvious, but at the same time it has to be the correct space. Like here, for example, you have the sound coming in from the inside. You could probably have it uh, let's say and that's also another complicated part of lettering, because the letters all have to be the same size on the same page. Meaning you cannot cut corners like sometimes some artists might think
Hmm.
that they're going to have a finished book. They go to their letter and they say, "Well, right now this font size is perfect. I like it." And I don't know if you ever had a customer asking you that, but they go and say, "Well, but on panel three, this balloon here is a lot of text, a lot of exposition. Can you make the font a little bit smaller on panel three on the other page, while the all the other letters will be all the different size?"
Yeah.
So that's something obviously that some junior comic book makers have not don't understand. And obviously the letters, the font size, all has to be the same for the same proportion throughout the
Yeah.
book.
Well, there are some tricks that you can sort of work within to make that a little easier.
Hmm.
But generally speaking, you're correct. I mean, you don't want to just have all different sizes of word balloons and texts all over the place, because then it's just, one, it looks unprofessional, and two, it's just hard to decipher as a reader.
That's also one
So,
thing I wanted to ask. Um, I have experience working with two kinds of letterers,
mhm,
um, especially the American letters that I work with, the work in the U.S. comic book market. They mainly do books for that market,
mhm,
and there is obviously the quite careful attention to leave all dialogue or all narration boxes or whatever it is that belong to a particular panel inside those panel borders.
mhm.
Um, uh, Again, from your experience, is it something that you always attempt to do? Is it a rule of thumb that you follow? Or is it something that you have no problems with being flexible? Because, for example, in European style of comics and graphic novel style. They're a little bit more flexible. A lot of narration and even dialogue tends to never be constrained to the actual panel borders. It's not that they do it for just for the kicks of it. They do it partially from an aesthetics point of view, but also sometimes because they don't find the absolute necessity to leave something constrained to a particular panel. But I've noticed very much with one particular set of letterers, they're very adamant that they want to leave everything that is supposed to be in a particular panel inside that panel. What's your
Hmm.
experience with that, just as a curiosity?
Well, I do try to follow that rule as much as possible,
Hmm.
but there are instances where you don't need to, or two, you can't. Um, it all sort of boils down to what the artist wants, in my experience, and how I tend to work.
Right.
Um, I try to work as closely with them as I can, so that they're not out of the loop, and they can sort of see the process as it's happening. So with that, with being able to work with them, is you can make suggestions like, oh, hey, maybe we should cut this dialogue out completely because it makes sense just in the visual. Or what if we moved it from panel one to panel two, so that because there's not enough room in panel one. So there's a lot of that give and take that you can go through um, on a project that will sort of
Hmm.
be. I'm losing my words here. Will sort of be the way that you can avoid having to cross the panel borders. And there's, you can cut into the panel itself and have the balloon sort of butt up against it in the square, or on the line, or in the corner of it, and that frees up a lot of space as well. But burst balloons outside of a panel, somebody screaming something really loud,
Yes,
and all of that, I think that works out fine. But
that would be the most obvious one. Yes.
yeah, yeah. But in some instances, if if it's a panel that is one fraction of a second the same as the next panel, or, a fraction of a second forward or backward from the panel in front of it, then those can maybe cross if it's sort of the same thought or the same idea happening. But generally speaking, it reads better to try and keep them in the panel if you can.
Yes. He's
So
also
that's what I try to do.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's also in terms of accessibility for the reader. That's
Hmm.
also one of the reasons why most American comics, the balloons are firmly stuck within the panel area, basically.
Right.
Again, it's something that differs. I would say it's a cultural thing, probably, because again, for example, the French even probably stick balloons outside of the actual book. So, but it is very good to hear you saying there's a lot of back and forth between you and the creator. Obviously, I mean, in terms of and again, for anyone listening, and this is what I like to do in these kind of interviews, is to approach each one of you guys that I invite here to speak about your work and your method, is because anyone with interest in trying to do this or start doing this, has a lot of questions, has a lot of doubts, and I know because I sometimes I browse pros doing their tutorials online, and I find them very incomplete. I find them, no, but listen, you should have said this for the guy that is interested in doing that.
Hmm.
So it's good to know that there's a lot of back and forth between you and the creator, because it's something that not every letterer affords himself to do. I mean, if we're going down the food chain, I mean, the guys that are more paid obviously is the artist first,
Yep.
then the colorists already demand some colorists already demand a hefty fee. That they already have some name, some weight in the industry. There's some better ones than others, obviously,
Yeah.
and but unfortunately, the letterers are always down in the food chain as the guys that their work is by rule, again, rule of thumb, is not the most well compensated one. So is the page rates per page. It's just really a basic payment. And despite that, again, in a lot of instances, it gives a lot of work, and it is very important.
Hmm.
Obviously, that at the same time, and also by the force of necessity, makes a letterer have to do several gigs throughout the month. So while an artist can give himself the luxury, because obviously he's got 85% of the work, okay, 80% of the work of a page, or maybe statistically maybe a little bit less, depending on which point of view we're looking at. But obviously, while the artist has the full month to dedicate himself to 22 pages, the letterer might be able, like you said, take an hour or two with a page, might be able to go for a 22 pages book in a week. Would that be a
Oh,
assumption?
I mean, if you again, it would depend on the book, but a 22-page book you could have done in a
3 to 5 days, maybe less.
yeah, 3 to 5 days, easy.
Exactly.
And if you're crunching deadline time, then you could probably get it done in 2 days.
Yes.
So,
So obviously the letterer is forced to obviously do many books throughout the month. I mean, if he can get them, and if he does get them, then to be able to make a sole career out of that, usually has to be several books throughout the month, which I'm sure is
mhm.
difficult to be able to get so many books in a month. There's only so many books out there, and obviously there are a lot of letters.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that some letterers do take their time, because the point that I was trying to make is that it's a very is a very streamlined, very commercial stage of the comic book making process, the lettering stage, and it's probably the most industrialized one. Meaning, when it gets to the final steps, the letterers are usually, again, it's the last guys that come in. They're like the sound effects guys if it was a movie,
Hmm.
and as movie making goes, soundtrack is usually the last thing to be added, and sometimes just 5 days before a major release of a movie, they're still tweaking the sound mix.
Yeah.
Never the special effects. It's always, every
Yeah.
time we know there's a final delay on a movie, a major blockbuster, it's always because they're doing the final mix of the soundtrack, either the score or something, some sound effect. The dialogue has been on the can for a long time. Is
Right.
usually the last things. So obviously that forces and obviously I'm just going to use this word loosely. If it forces the latter to be a bit, well, let's say, a bit cynical in terms of his own job, meaning, I'm just going to do this and that's it. I know what I have to do. I know what is the correct way of doing it, and there's usually very little exchange with the creator, unless there's specific pages, like you were mentioning, the ones with the sound effects or whatever, some color or some shift in the font or whatever. So it's what you're doing right now is quite important, to have that dialogue, which unfortunately, regretfully, but because of the in terms of the work itself, it's not usually it's not something that the latter usually does. It's not that
Right.
it's not his main interest. His main interest is really just to put that dialogue on the page. Again, putting it in the right way. Otherwise, he will not be a professional, obviously, and then just get it out there.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of experience of uh, co-creating, almost like to put the soundtrack, so to speak, on the book? Do you have a lot of experience speaking directly with the creators, or has it been only one or two situations, and most of the books you've been left to your own devices, and they were happy with whatever you produced? What has been your experience up to now?
Mostly, it's been sort of, um, I would say, a sort of split between the two. You just tend to get an artist that will just let you fly, and maybe they don't. Maybe they just don't care about the lettering as much, or not. I shouldn't say they don't care about it. They do want a good letterer, but maybe they just don't understand the process as much or whatever. So they just say, you do you, you go and make it as good as you can. And other artists will want to make sure that every little pixel of a balloon placement is exactly where they want it. And I'm okay working either way. Um,
Awesome.
it's just ultimately my service is that of making the product as good as it can be, and if that means being on a Google Hangout for 3 hours, making sure every balloon is where the artist wants it, then I'm in the position right now where I can do that. And you know,
Awesome.
maybe I'll be too busy. I'm just like, sorry, man, you're gonna deal with what I got. But
Yeah.
right now, it's like, yeah, let's make it look great. And that's how we worked with Graveyard Shift. That's how I worked on Jawbreakers. Was making sure we made these books as professional and as just as perfect as we could get them.
And
So,
again, sometimes the vision of the artist, I mean, is not the best one. You know, he's got a very
mhm.
precise idea of what he wants. I myself know that's a mistake I do, and I go up to a letter and I say, you know, I might not get as anal as some guys, pardon my French, but you know, I say, well, I really don't want that background cover, and this thing really has to be to the left side and a little bit.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is sometimes you as the letterer, when you're just being a letterer and you weren't the one that also drew it, you don't know the importance of maybe some of those background things. So there was a few times where I would, to me, it wasn't important, but there was a background element where John Malin was like, "Hey, could we move the balloon just you know, a half inch over this way because we want to make sure that we can see that thing back there?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course." And to me, as a you know, just sort of making sure that the balloons are where I think they need to be, I wouldn't have known had he not drawn that page that, oh, that thing in the background, you know, that vase or that gun or that, you know, aquarium or whatever, that needs to have prominence. Because a lot of times when you're lettering, you're also not necessarily reading it as much. It's sort of something you do after, you know,
I
you letter it
understand
and
that.
then you read through it. You're like, okay, does this make sense? Does it flow well? At least that's sort of the way I work is I like to put the balloons in and then I'll go back and make sure, oh wait, that's not supposed to be there. Let me flip that around or whatever. So, but
Yeah,
yeah.
the opposite is just following the script and slapping things on the page to
Hmm.
actually understand the script, understand the story, and
Yeah,
work with it, basically.
exactly.
Well, you know, there you go, guys. If you want to get it while it's hot, Eric right now still has the time to
Oh
take
yeah, I
time
do.
to do it properly. Because again, most lecturers will not give you that luxury. Now they'll just receive the script, they receive the pages, and they got to get it done as quickly as possible because they got to move on to the next project. And some it's very refreshing to hear a letter that says, "Yeah, I can go on Google Hangouts for a few hours and do exactly what you want." It's also for me. I mean, it's my opinion that doing that is also a learning process for both the artist and the letterer. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
many years they have a career because each book, it's a different project, and each book, it's got its own structure and its own language, and as such, each page becomes a learning evolution. So what works for one book will not necessarily work for the other one, as it goes with the font. If you're doing
Yep.
a Walt Disney cartoon, you're gonna have a particular font, and if you're doing something surrealistic, you know, with a kind of Bill Sienkiewicz kind of painting acrylics, you know, you're gonna have a completely different font, or maybe
Yep.
something hand drawn straight onto the picture. So it is a complex thing. So it's very, yeah, I appreciate very much that a letterer, you know, would be able to spend as much time as you yourself spend going over the whole thing. Well, this will be the finished. By the way, are we watching the actual finished balloons here, or this is just a little example and layer on
No,
design?
this is the script as I have it right now. I'm sure we'll go
Awesome.
through it again and maybe change things, but yeah, you're looking at the final what it will be. And I realized I missed a. It's hard to talk and letter. I realized I missed a couple sentences of dialogue here. I gotta throw in. So
Oh, that's
uh,
coming from Toto, and that's coming from
hmm
Dorothy. All right,
yeah.
awesome.
So she's gonna say that, and he's gonna make a little noise, and then
Hmm.
she's gonna respond to that. So Toto will have a sort of R2D2 style of talking, you know, beeps and warbles
Yes, yes,
and all of that. So the reader won't be able to understand what he says, but as a unless you're reading it in context with the
yes.
reaction of the people around him. So
That
that,
obviously, that obviously is the well, either the final or the first most important step is the sequence of dialogue
Hmm.
and squeezing in the sound effect, especially if the sound effect is a plot point or a plot device or is part of the dialogue itself, like in this case. Then to be able to make it in the correct sequence, and that is ultimately important, no matter graphic novels in France or U.S. comics. It needs to be in the correct order, so people know actually who to read first and then follow up. So, I mean, balloons might be out of the panels, but if they're not in the correct order, then we have a problem, and that's obviously it's complicated when the panels are very busy, when there's a lot of art that the artist wants to save. And again, this is an advice for any fledgling artist. Always leave a little bit of room. Think about it. Think about especially if you're writing the story yourself. Think about always to leave a little bit of room for your text. Or
Yep.
even if you really want to do very complex backgrounds or whatever foregrounds, just think that wherever you're going to have your darlings, wherever you're going to have the stuff that you really want to keep safe, remember to, well, you got to bend your arms sometimes. It cannot just be exactly in the place where you always imagine it had to be. Sometimes you really have to move it a bit to the left or to the right, because you have to think that text will have to go there eventually, and it
Yep.
has to fit somewhere. There's only so many miracles Eric can do. Yeah,
That's right. I'm only one man.
that's
Yeah,
it.
and I mean, you nailed it. I mean, you gotta even in the layout stage, I will put little circles, thinking, okay, I think the dialogue could fit here and here, and then when you start to pencil and ink it, try not to lose that empty space. And if you are allowing yourself to leave room for it, maybe leave just a bit more, just in case. Even if it's, I mean, on the page, a couple of millimeters in any direction can really make or break how easy it is to get a balloon in there. It really can. If you're trying to avoid covering up any of the character, trying
Exactly.
to avoid crossing a panel border, then even those small things can really make a difference. So it's one of those things you just got to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, to finish it off, I mean, again, it's all parts of the comic book language. I mean, you have to think in advance as a creator and as an artist that the book is not just a good story and flashy art. I mean, you really have to, unless the case is a book with no dialogue, which again is rare, you
Hmm.
really have to think that the final product is a conciliation of a series well, usually different team members, but even if it's just one man band, is still the marriage of a series of things. So we got the script has to translate correctly into the sequential action. Sequential action has to be well presented with art which is accessible and readable. And then you got the third stage, which is the letters, and besides the colors. So it's a lot of work. A comic book is a lot of work, not to demotivate anyone, but you always have to think all those things. You cannot just do a bunch of panels and then well, wherever this falls, it will be fine. It's not like that. Again, it's like a movie, isn't it? You got the actors, you got the sets, you got the special effects, and we know those give a lot of work. Is Well, every time a movie ends, we see the credits roll. Yeah, there's three, five
Yeah,
thousand people there. Yeah,
yeah,
that's how much work you gave. And believe me, there's a lot of people that do work in a lot of entertainment products, especially in movies, and they don't get credit. Yeah, a lot of people. So every time you watch a movie credits, just think of the other 300 guys that went and credited, and just imagine how much work everybody had for those guys that actually are credited.
yeah,
So, but anyway, we're getting away from comics, but
yeah.
it's a similar kind of
It is
idea.
very similar, yeah. And any one of those things that is not done to the best that it can be, that's where you get dinged. That's where a reviewer or a fan will say, "Well, I liked the movie, but I really didn't like the special effects. I thought that monster looked fake." And it's just, if you don't put the time in, if you don't put the care in, then it can show. So you know
All right,
whether it's just you by yourself or a whole team, I think it's important to put as much effort into everything
everything.
that you can. And I understand that deadlines get in the way, life gets in the way, and things will be difficult. But you at least got to put forth the effort and don't just phone it
Yeah,
in, because people can tell.
Exactly. Everything counts. If you really want to make a good book, a book that is successful, you cannot have short measures. You really have to go all the way in every single part of the book. So, well, I mean, we're gonna wrap this up. I usually keep
Okay.
these interviews to 1 hour or a few more minutes. So we're already an hour and 50 minutes. You know, I'm not clock watching, but but I just noticed that it's we can wrap this up for now. And anyway, you still have your little one to indulge.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go for
I gotta
now.
go take care of him. Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming over. Great seeing you working. Well, you in action basically,
Hmm.
and we'll be looking forward to Oz coming next year,
Yeah, coming next spring.
next spring.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, I think you have another plug you wanted to give us a heads up. I think there's something else right now. I mean, besides Jawbreakers and Graveyard Shift, I think Graveyard Shift is still probably accessible for people to get a copy if they go now on Indiegogo. Is that right?
Yeah, I think both Jawbreakers and Graveyard Shift are available.
They're still
And
available. Jawbreakers
yeah,
as
and
well.
I can double check real quick. And I'm also lettering Brutus the Badass, Ravage Kill All Men, Asami Children of the Rusu, and a lot of other things that people have reached out for me and said, "Oh, hey, once the campaign, starts or whenever it gets funded, we'll want you to letter it." So other projects that I just can't,
Oh,
I
awesome.
just can't mention right now. I'm sort of like right here on the cusp of being able to show everybody my work, but I can't yet because it's just
Yeah,
not out yet. But you can see my pages here on the Oz book that I'm lettering, and the Asami Indiegogo. We've updated the um, Indiegogo with my lettering pages as opposed to what Stephen had up there previously, and
okay,
that one ends today. So that's
right.
the last leg of that campaign is it's in the last few hours right now. So
Right. So
definitely
for anyone
go check
listening,
that out.
okay, if they're listening later on than today, probably Sammy Wright will be already finished. But for anyone else, so these are all books available right now on Indiegogo. So you got Brutus, you got a Sammy, and Ravage, Kill All Man, right? That
Hmm.
I know those guys.
Yeah,
So right, okay. So anyone wanting to follow up on Eric's work, if you really fell in love with these fonts, you can't get enough of them. Those are the books, and that is the place where to get them. In the meanwhile, keep a heads up for us, which I think is going to be phenomenal. So thank you
thank
very
you.
much, Eric, for coming.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks for having me.
And that's great. And we're going to stop broadcasting. Just as a heads up for everyone else following this channel, tomorrow night, the 27th of October, around 9 p.m., that's London time, which I think is 5, 6 hours ahead from US Central Time. And then you can probably do your maths. We're going to be having a special Halloween stream. Going to have a bunch of guests, people coming in and out. We might have some famous people. I mean, it's probably not going to be Elon Musk, but we're gonna. I'm starting to get I've sent a lot of invites to a lot of people that I befriended over the years, and they're all very big artists. And when I say big artists, I mean people with a lot of years of career and that everyone knows their names. I'm not gonna say straight away who they are. Obviously, I want to leave it as surprises because some of them actually have not come back to me yet. But these are people that I know roughly well, and as well as best as you can through social media,
Right.
and they might start hopping in as guests, and that will be great. It'll be great for you guys because you actually will hear straight from the mouths of the big guys how they work and what's their method and all that. So, but for tomorrow night there will be a few guests coming over, and we're going to be talking about horror. So it's going to be probably a 3 hour stream or a bit more than that, and we're going to talk about classic horror, modern horror, literature, movies, comic books as well. So we're probably going to just say stupid things, and drunk as well, or maybe we'll just find out the meaning of life tomorrow night, live here
Oh,
on this channel. Who knows?
tune in to find out.
That's it.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Eric is going to go, and we're going to stop broadcasting for tonight. Thank you very much, Ned. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Lewis.